Andy Robinson, let me say at the top of the program here, since I know the FBI is listening, I have no classified documents at my home or office. Just letting you know. Now, some of you might be a little rankled. Oh, he's making a political joke. Okay, you don't talk politics or supposedly religion. Well, you're in the wrong place for that. Well, we're not talking politics today, but if you got a little bit offended there, you're going to want to listen to this. I love this topic because it's we live in a very offensive world, but we're told to not take offense. But what about righteous anger? What about, isn't God offended at things? What is going on? What is this all about? Well, my guest today has a book that has reached a lot of people, and I think it's a message that we need to be reminded of. Maybe you know this, maybe you don't, but it's a good reminder because it will literally change your life once you get this truth. The book is called Unoffendable, and it is written by Brant Hansen, and Brant is a radio guy. He has a podcast also called the Brant and Sherry Oddcast, which I love the name right there. So it tells you a little bit, tells me he's got a sense of humor, but we'll find out. Brant, good to have you on Life Today Live.
Thanks, man. Honored to be here. Totally.
So the unoffendable thing,
Yeah.
where did this start with for you?
Well, honestly, like I've gone through trauma and stuff, like a lot of people growing up, and but what brought it to fore, thinking about anger, was I was always taught, there's righteous anger and unrighteous anger, and so we need to hang on to the righteous anger. And I was always, okay, so, but how long am I supposed to hang on to it? And no one can answer that question for me. Nobody. And so even as a radio host, you know how it is, any job, customer service, people complain, they're upset, they're like, should I get angry about that they're not being fair to me? Am I supposed to spend my life being angry when people are wrong or messed up? When I see sin in the world, am I supposed to be angry about that? I honestly didn't know. I thought I was supposed to. So what I did was I started hunting around the Bible. Of course, I can't find righteous anger for humans in the Bible.
Interesting.
Because it's not in there. I was shocked. Like, honestly, like that's not what I learned growing up, but I have to allow that, hey, God continues to teach us things. God's anger is righteous in the Bible, but he's sinless, and he expects us to forgive people because we're sinners who've been forgiven. That's the consistent message. And anger, the only time people are like, oh, don't you know that verse? Like, for people at church, they'll be like, well, in Ephesians 4, it says, in your anger, do not sin.
Mm-hmm.
It does say that. So anger is a natural reaction. It's like a fight or flight reaction to things. I get that. That happens. But people don't memorize the rest of the verse. The rest of the verse says, get rid of anger before the sun goes down.
Oh.
And then 5 verses later, same paragraph, get rid of all anger. And people want to act like anger is this thing that we're entitled to. And actually, it'll destroy us. What we're supposed to do is stand up against injustice, to do the right thing, to make set things right, but not out of anger.
Okay.
Like there's plenty of motivation to do that without anger. And I like what Dallas Willard said. He's like, whatever we do with anger, we can do better without it.
Yeah. Oh, look,
so
quoting Dallas Willard already. Okay. I have fallen into this. I fully admit I have fallen into this because, there are things God hates.
Totally.
And it does say be angry, but don't sin, which to me has always said these things should make you angry rather than an acknowledgement of, yeah, you will get angry at times. But what do you do with it then?
Right.
Are you suggesting that if we feel anger, that we're already in a bad place, or we should just recognize it and know then what to do with it?
Okay, the latter, and it could be the former, but here's what I mean by this. Like, I liken it to like the One Ring from Lord of the Rings, because I like to take every point and reduce it back to Lord of the Rings, but also because like Frodo didn't ask for that, to carry this burden, but he had to. But he was supposed to get rid of it. Like, you have to throw it in the cracks of doom or it's going to kill you.
Mm.
That's what anger is. That's the way anger is described in the Bible. Like, it's not a fruit of the Spirit. People want to act like righteous. Well, if it's righteous, why are we supposed to get rid of it before the sun goes down? Well, it's not in the list of fruits of the Spirit, like love, joy, peace, anger, goodness. Like, no, it's in all the negative lists. because it'll kill it. So here's what's fascinating. I actually got to talk about this a couple of weeks ago on Good Morning America from a Jesus follower perspective, which is really ironic and funny. I didn't expect that, but it was neat because the anchor said, so what are we supposed to do? I was like, well, all of our culture has plenty of articles like New York Times, Washington Post about our anger epidemic as a culture. And when they talk to psychologists about what to do about it, it's like take a long walk, listen to some music, take a hot bath, clear your mind, do some yoga. It's like they never mention forgiveness, which is the actual way that Jesus is giving us to deal with it. It doesn't mean you have to stay in relationship with people forever. Mm-hmm. You may need to end the relationship, but you let go of your sense of anger so that you're not living with this the rest of your life. And the weird thing is, unless you forgive, you are staying in relationship with them for the rest of your life yeah. in your head.
Yeah.
So forgiveness is freedom. What Jesus' way of living leads to peace. So he's saying forgive or you won't be forgiven. It's like, this is a non-negotiable. And you can't say, I forgive you, but I'm staying angry with you. That doesn't make any sense. And the reason you forgive somebody is not because they deserve it. The reason you forgive somebody is because you didn't deserve it.
Yeah.
So you're honoring God by saying, I see what you've done for me. I saw Calvary. I saw that. That was on me. I have to extend this to other people. I can't stay angry at them because of what God's done for me. And I know this is a healthier way to live.
Okay. So I hear you, and I agree with you on anger. But what about offense? That's not exactly the same thing?
No, and that's perceptive. Like it's not. I will say this: when you start the day in light of what God has done for you, and this is a practice, right? So you start the day saying, "I'm going to forgive people in advance for the things that they do, what they're going to do." And you know what? People do the same thing over and over. So it's so funny how humans are shocked by the same thing over and over and over. Like, somebody just cut me off on the interstate. Like, have you ever driven before? This is what life is like on this planet. Right. I can't believe my mom said that. Like, your mom's been saying stuff like that for 67 years. Like, this shouldn't shock you anymore. But if you start the day, you do become unoffendable. You can actually choose at the beginning of the day, I'm going to forgive people in advance. And it becomes this way of life where you're walking out Jesus' way of forgiveness, and you start to react to things in a different way naturally. Like, it becomes more like Jesus in the moment, because you're making this commitment daily to God to forgive people and realize people are broken, and yet you're going to forgive them. You become less offendable as a result. And it's really I think it's discipleship, honestly, man.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. When we look at offense, the scriptures have a couple things to say about it. One is, if possible, live in peace, don't give offense. Another one tells us as followers of Christ to not take offense. And when I look at it in those two components, I see it as transactional. It's a two-part transaction. So the way I understand it, if I'm not going to take offense, you can try to give me something, you can try to give me that ring all day long. Mm-hmm. I don't have to take it. I can be like, no, sorry. No, you can throw it at me. It's going to fall to the ground because I'm not taking it. I think offense is something we have to willingly take in order to live with it, to internalize it.
Yeah, I think, but in general, in daily life, I think you're right. Now, there are some things that can happen to people, abuse, for example, where it's totally understandable to react to that with fight or flight, this anger thing. Sure. And what I'm encouraging them to do, and me, having gone through this as well in a different way, but is to say, yes, this happened. I have to work towards forgiveness, though, because otherwise this anger is going to destroy me. I'll be victimized again. But on a day-to-day basis, about just day-to-day offenses, I think you're totally right. Mm-hmm. And I also think that if you're being offended all the time, it's probably because you have an ego problem. And I love how Tim Keller talks about that. He's like, you don't even notice your right elbow until after you bang it on something. It's already inflamed, right? Mm-hmm. But then every time you touch something, it's like, well, you may have an inflamed ego if you're constantly being offended. Mm-hmm. So the more we grow up, towards being like Jesus, I think the less offendable we get just by the nature of that. I don't have much to be threatened about. What are you going to take from me? See, that's where anger comes from. It's threat. So if I've already, like, you could take my life, but I already gave that away.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't have much to lose here. I've already kind of gone all in with this Jesus stuff. So it's like you become a certain type of person that's not as easily threatened, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's a big part of that.
It does. What do you do? Here's the hard question. You mentioned abuse. And even if someone has suffered abuse and worked through it to a point of forgiveness, that abuse in and of itself is offensive. It's an offense. And it's always going to be an offense. And when it's not an offense, I think maybe we have another problem entirely. What do we do with things that are genuinely offensive, according
That's
to
it.
Scripture?
I have no choice, according to Scripture, but to go to God with this and forgive out of my own gratefulness for what He's done for me. That's the scriptural plan for how to deal with this. So it's like the unmerciful servant story that Jesus tells.
That's a tough one.
But I've been forgiven a ton. I have to turn around and forgive other people because of that. It's a response to what God has done for me. That's the resource. I've done like TED Talks and stuff on this. I'll talk to a mainstream crowd. It's not necessarily, don't look it up. It's terrible, by the way. But like, I'll talk to a mainstream crowd, and I have to tell them, like, forgiveness helps everybody. I mean, Jesus is brilliant. He's a genius in light of all the other things he is about who he is as God. Like, but his way of life is genius. Forgiveness will benefit you whether you're a believer or not. But honestly, the deepest resource for it comes from being a believer in Jesus. Mm-hmm. Comes from the fact that I think Jesus has forgiven me and that I'm no better than anybody else. So this is a way to freedom. It is very difficult when you've gone through horrible things. I tell a story in the book of a guy who was, his family of 12 was murdered with him. They thought they'd gotten him, threw them all in a mass grave in Cambodia. Jeez. He emerged from the grave with his family, like they're all gone. And he gets out and dedicates himself to avenging their death against the communists. Mm-hmm. Well, he finds the guys who did it, but by that time he'd become a believer, and he realized, I have to forgive these people. I can't carry around this anger the rest of my life. Jesus demands it. So, I mean, there's a pretty extreme example, but I wanted to include that because no one's exempt from this. Like, this is something that we all have to walk out because it's what it means to pick up our cross and follow Jesus. This is what it means.
Yeah. Okay. Don't go look up the TED Talk by Brant Hansen. That's BrantHansen. Yes. But check out the book, Unoffendable. It's available wherever you get books. The difficult part I would see, if you're talking especially to non-Christian audiences, is I don't think we can do this on our own. I know I couldn't, and I grew up in the church.
I don't think so. But I talk about a guy named Robert Sapolsky. He calls himself a militant atheist, and he's a primate neuroendocrinologist from Stanford. And he wrote a book coming at this from an atheistic perspective. I think you'll find this fascinating. It's called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And he writes about why we're the only creatures on the planet who get ulcers. Nobody else does. And it has to do with stress and anger and anxiety and stuff. But he talks about how your entire physiology changes to avoid threat. So that rush that you get when you're angry, that fight or flight thing, when you're scared, like that happens to animals, but it's only supposed to last for 30 seconds. Like, it's to make you faster to get away from the lion that's chasing after you. Like, all of these, their cortisol level, adrenaline levels, blood sugar levels, all of this stuff, blood pressure, all of your reproductive system starts to shut down. All this stuff happens, and it's in order to help you get away or fight back. But he said only humans can hold on to that in their systems. And it kills us. It changes your skin. It changes your weight. It changes your blood pressure. It contributes to diabetic situations, like this anger thing. And his conclusion, which I thought was so fascinating, and I got a kick out of it, his conclusion at the end of his course I was listening to was, you know what? I would just tell you students, don't worry about tomorrow. It'll take care of itself. You should be like an animal that isn't concerned about that stuff. They're only concerned about what's going on right now. I was like, I have heard that before.
Did he even know he was quoting
He didn't
Jesus?
seem to. He didn't seem to. And I was just like, dude, that's amazing. You came to that conclusion.
Oh,
And
that's well.
how
Just
tender of
go
God to
ahead.
tell
Yeah,
us that. I was just thinking, like, he knows how we're made. Just say, hey, well, be
right,
like the birds.
right.
God loves us that much. He would say, I just think that's the coolest thing.
Because then that goes
That's
back
all.
to my theory that science, as practiced properly, which is coming up with theories, knocking them down, eliminating what's not true to get to what is true, is really just God revealing Himself and His creation to us to benefit us, and you could see
I,
that in that story. But
yeah, that's totally true. I see that with the modern, cognitive or cognitive scientists now. They basically concluding they're getting Nobels for this, no exaggeration, for concluding that humans are self-righteous machines, and we're all deluded about how good we are. That's how they put it. And I'm like, again, there was a guy a couple thousand years ago.
right, yeah, even before him, there's stuff in the Old
Oh,
Testament.
totally, yeah, exactly, right.
Yeah, we get that with some of the dietary things. It's where you go, oh, I get the science, so that weird
Yeah, who
law
knew,
in
huh?
Leviticus makes sense now. You know,
Hmm.
how have um, how have you personally had to deal with offenses coming your way? Because I know some of your background, some of the
Hmm.
struggles you faced. Um, this is something you had to learn early on.
I didn't know what to do with it because like a lot of people, if it's family, you go through stuff. It's very difficult because that can stick with you the rest of your life. And if you're told that, well, this is righteous for you to hang on to it, well, now I'm holding all this and it's destroying me and it's going to interfere with my relationship. So learning this has helped me a lot. And that's in the big picture. And in the daily picture, since I'm in the public eye or I write things or I'm on the radio, I, before I open an email, I decide I'm going to forgive this person. I mean, before I even open up, well, that's a really healthy way to live. You know
Mm-hmm.
that? Like, it helps me. Like, there's a lightness to it. It really is true. Like, you tether yourself to Jesus' way of life. You yoke with Him, work with Him. There's a lightness to life where you can laugh more. So instead of being upset that people are unfair with me, I just like, well, that's humans,
Well,
you know?
I do, and that's obviously a gift from God to be able to live that way, and that's what He wants all of us to do. I'm curious if you had to if you struggled at all, and I don't know the answer. This is not leading something I already know, but with almost being offended at God for some of the physical struggles that you face.
Oh, yeah, you know what? Definitely growing up. So yeah, I have some physical challenges and stuff. And I'm also on the autism spectrum, so I had some social challenges for sure. Like I've come a long way, but definitely. So yeah, you know what though? I think God can handle that. I actually think if you are upset at Him, the picture I get from all the stories in the Bible are that you can be really honest with Him, and He can handle. Like that's a good place to go with it. And so I have had it out with Him. But I see even Job. Job says a bunch of stuff that's not even right. It's wrong. And then God basically says, "Look, you don't know what you're talking about," and then rewards him.
Yeah,
Like that's really sweet to me too. Like I think I can have these really honest conversations with God, and He can handle it.
yeah.
And that's been really helpful for me to realize. I hope that makes sense.
It does, and I think it's good for people to hear because I think, especially if you grow up in the church, you're afraid that you might offend God.
Yeah, He can
But
handle it.
right, yeah. Now, and the beauty is that He starts, like you said, from a place of forgiveness, and
Totally.
that's the way to. It's the way to get rid of a lot of junk. We have a society that says, oh, what you did offends offends me, and it's kind of funny because I don't know how old you are, but you know, I
Old.
grew up in a culture where the church kind of taught us to be offended, by all these things out
Hmm.
there,
Yeah, right.
I've seen I've seen some healthy change in that regard, you know. But the world used to be like, hey man, whatever, But now it's like it's popular to be offended, And I don't know
Okay,
if this
which
is
is
just
really interesting.
yeah, right. I don't know if it's
Like,
just kind of a cyclical generational thing or whatever, but how do we, how do you, can we communicate what you're trying to communicate to a world that
yes.
just is hung on a fence?
Well, I can't tell them to stop being offended. That doesn't help.
Mm.
Like, okay, I'm coming at this from a Jesus follower's perspective, but imagine if they saw a people that, imagine Christians were the most non-offended people on the planet. We'd be the only ones.
Yeah, we would. Yeah.
And that would be really compelling because I've walked this out. Like my wife and I have walked this out where I used to be pretty Pharisaical by nature. I would say pretty comfortably. I'm a justice and rules guy. That's who I am. I even named my son Justice. Like, this is who I am. I like the rules. Well, we've become more unscandalizable too by people. Like they can't, we don't see anybody and go, oh my gosh, you're just so disgusting. So we've had neighbors that have tried to find out because they know we're believers and they're trying to scandal like, well, but we this and we that. And we like, we don't, we don't, we don't shrink away.
Yeah.
And we've seen where that's actually busted through, where they actually will let us pray with them and stuff. Like at first they're Wiccans,
Yeah.
and a year or two later we're praying with them. Like it's because we know people are messed up. There's scripture about Jesus. It says Jesus knew what they were thinking. No one had to tell Jesus what men were like. Like he knows. And I think as a believer in Jesus, if we know people are messed up. Why are we constantly shocked at this? We can look at them with different eyes because of what God has done for us. So I think that's a critical point to make.
Yeah. And yeah, critical, and not just to hear, but to internalize, to live out. So that's good. I have someone who's watching who wants me to ask you about The Chosen. Is there something there I don't know?
Huh. No, I mean, I like it.
Okay.
So.
Right. Hey, that's the risk I get sometimes. Okay.
Do they think I'm Dallas Jenkins? We kind of look like brothers a little bit, so I don't know.
Yeah, probably
It.
not. Oh. All right. Before I let you go, tell me real quick about, I want to show people your website if I can click my buttons quick enough. This is branthansen.com. branthansen.com. You can visit that. And what do you do on the podcast? That's the thing. That's the question I have for you.
It's about half comedic and about half hopefully insightful. We take our daily radio show and then we put some extra stuff on there. And I mean, you can tell here's a guy on the spectrum who is genuinely, hopefully, trying to seek God, but has an odd sense of humor. And then my co-host Sherry is an African American woman with a huge laugh. And she's brilliant. She's a comedian in her own right, but she's pretty much the straight person that has to put up with my weirdness.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the Bible study, because the whole topic of offense, not taking it, forgiveness, it really is a new, for a lot of people, new way of living, and it really is a necessary way, I believe, in order to really experience all that God has intended for us on this earth. You have a Bible study that people can do in their homes now?
Yeah, I did a video series. So it's like 6 videos of me talking about this, and then you can discuss it. So that's online. You get the study guide and the video series. But for small group discussion, like this stuff is fire, as the kids would say, because everybody can relate to this.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Everybody. And we're like, what are we supposed to do with our anger? Like there are wrong things, horrible injustices. What are we supposed to do about that? So I tackle that and how to actually live at peace and fight for the good things, the right things.
Good. Very good. Check that out, branthansen.com. Man, I love the conversation. The time has flown by because this is a big one. This is an important one. Is there anything you want to add before I let you go?
No, just thanks. It's great to talk about. And if people are wondering, well, what am I supposed to do about injustice? Aren't we supposed to be angry about injustice? I do tackle that in the book and talk about, hey, like how we do that and historical figures who've done that. So anyway,
yeah. Well, and tell me if I'm on the same track as you, because I don't know, but my attitude, at Life Outreach, I've gone and seen, I literally saw 3 children die in a clinic in one day in Angola last time I was there. One that I'd prayed for and died later that day. And that to me is an offense in a sense, right? I mean, it should not be this way. But my response, having been places like this, yeah, at first I've gone through the gamut: anger, depression, almost like despondency, like this problem's too big. I think the proper response, and the one that I found to be healthy, is action on our part.
That's exactly what I'm saying. And I even say, like, well, police don't do their jobs better if they're angry.
Yeah.
Like the military doesn't do its job. Judges, we don't want judges and juries. These are all people who are charged with taking act. Like action is where it's at.
Yeah.
Patting ourselves on the back. And this is where our culture's at. Hey, I tweeted about something. I took a stand.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we actually need you to do something.
Right.
And to do it. And if you're not angry and you do something, you're not clouded with anger. Your mind's clear, and you can actually be tactical and deliberate and loving about it and still do the right thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, good. Well, you can dig into that in the book Unoffendable. And Brant, man, again, I appreciate your time.
You.
Appreciate you standing up and really just putting this out there in a way that I think we can all understand and actually take hold of to live out, because it'll change your life. I promise you this. If you start doing these things, it will change your life. And I believe in most cases, if not all, it will start to change people around you. That's beautiful.
Yep.
So thank you again, man.
Thanks. It's a blast.
Appreciate you guys out there watching. Hit like, hit share, hit follow, hit subscribe if you haven't done those things already. And do check out